tonight's main event, the 3v3 tag tournament between 3 of the best fighting types in Generation 8 and 3 of the best fighting types in Generation 9. In this corner, the practiced pugilist, the undisputed tier king, float like a butterfree, sting like a bee drill, Mean Foo. His right-hand man, Timburr, known for clearing away hazards and being a really big powerhouse in his own right, the blue-collar backbreaker, Timburr. And last but not least, the newcomer nobody saw coming, Feathery Fury, Farfetch'd Galar. And in this corner, with the wildcard wrestlers from Generation 9, the one, the only, the crustacean, Crusher, Brawler. His right-hand man, the very fast ape you can't see coming, who might be too angry to die, Mankey. And last but not least, the final team member of the Generation 9 wildcard wrestlers, it's Krogunk. It's Krogunk. Which of these 2 teams will come out on top? That's what we're gonna see in tonight's main event. Alright, so Generation 8 was very much known for its very fighting type centric metagame, partly due to Mean Foo, but also because the other 2 are also really good. And then when we get to Generation 9, we have less fightings overall because of the Dexit. Every generation's going to have a weird dex now. But how good are the fighting types of Generation 9 versus Generation 8? Also, I want to get monetized anytime soon. I'm around 360 subscribers as of the recording of this video. If you could very much subscribe, share this, like this video, I'd very much appreciate it. If I can get monetized, I can make these videos more regularly, because then I don't have to worry about money as much. Thank you all very much for your support so far, and please, I would really appreciate all the support. If you could continue to, that would be great too. But let's get into what exactly made Generation 8 fighting types so good. Well, let's go over Mean Foo, the undisputed tier king, S tier in Generation 8. So, it's got a really good stat line, it's got really high attack stat, got some alright bulk, 50-50 is not terrible, but you also have speed that gets you up to 17, which is always really good. And the reason why it was so borderline unkillable the last generation is that because your attack is so high, you don't have to invest in it and still make a lot of progress. In addition, you have the ability Regenerator, which restores 1/3 of your maximum HP whenever you switch out, meaning that it can be really, really hard to kill if you don't have the proper tools for it. You also can run Eviolite, which boosts your defense and special defense by 1.5 times, so even though your defenses are kind of mid, with a lot of investment, you can be really, really tanky. This gets up to 21, and that's really good for Little Cup standards. Now we get to the move pool. You have High Jump Kick, which is 130 base power stab fighting type. And although you lose 50% of your max HP if you miss, it's kind of a sacrifice that you're willing to make for being so threatening without having any investment. Now you may be wondering to yourself, well, why not use Close Combat? And for those who don't know, Close Combat is 120 base power, it's 100% accuracy, which has a pretty big difference when compared to High Jump Kick's 10% miss chance, and it lowers your defense and special defense by 1. The reason why you're perfectly fine with running High Jump Kick instead of Close Combat is that if you miss, you can just regenerate off the damage, and Close Combat hitting nullifies your Eviolite, and that means that effectively you don't have one, and that's really bad. Especially because Knockoff is ever present in Generation 8, and what that does is that it removes your item. And it's a really good coverage move for the fightings because they hate seeing things like Psychic and Ghost types, so being able to have a really easily spammable move of, I just remove your Eviolite, it's all A-okay. On a move, that's also like weak to those mons anyway, always really nice. But also, Mean Foo's going to probably be taking one or two of these itself, so your Eviolite's not going to stay on too often, and having functionally minus, like, halved defense is really bad. You've also got a lot of support options besides just your really powerful stab fighting move like High Jump Kick. You also have U-turn, which switches you out after damaging the target, which is always really nice for getting a little bit of chip on your opponent, as well as getting out of a bad matchup, which we'll get into those bad matchups later. But it's just such a wonderful move to have, especially when you're also really threatening to psychic types that would otherwise, like, oh, well, I can take the fighting move kind of okay. Well, I just U-turn out on the bad matchup and I do a whole bunch of damage anyway, so take that. You also have a 4th slot, and Fake Out was the standard because it's really good for stalling out turns and chipping down your opponent every once in a while. However, excuse me, you also had a whole bunch of other stuff. If you wanted to, you could run Bulk Up to be really annoying. That was... I don't want to go there. I do not want to have to deal with Bulk Up Minfu. Oh god. But, like, you have some boosting moves. You have quite a lot of coverage moves, surprisingly. You have Poison Jab. The reason that's important is that Moral exists in this tier, so being able to hit it really hard and not be walled by it is always nice. You have Rock Slide, so that way you can hit Larvesta. You can run Stone Edge if you want less accuracy, but Rock Slide will also do the job pretty alright. You have Taunt, Swords Dance. You had a lot of options to run in your 4th slot. But also, with that being said, you always had to run High Jump Kick, U-turn, and Knockoff. It was very cut and dry. It was like Minfu, you knew what it was going to be. It's a very honest fighter. Now, obviously, it's going to be very hard to break down because of Regenerator, but it was a very, very honest fighter. You can also run a Triscarf set, High Jump Kick, U-turn, Knockoff, and then you run Close Combat. You don't really care about it all that much when it comes to the Scarf set, so like, you don't care about the defense decreases when you're not meant to be taking hits. Then we have the Blue Collar Backbreaker Timburr, and it's a very rigid set, but it's very good. So what essentially Timburr would do is that it gets defog. Don't ask me why, it just does. But that allowed it to clear hazards such as Stealth Rock and Spikes, and that was always really nice. You have Drain Punch as reliable stab, boosted by Iron Fist. Also, if you wanted to, you can run a Guts Bulk Up set. That one was pretty fun. But back to this, so you have Drain Punch, you also have Knockoff, and then the little niche that you also have is Mock Punch, meaning that you can revenge kill a little bit, which is always really nice. You have Defog, as I've mentioned before, that allows you to be a good teammate to stuff like Natsu and Larvesta that would otherwise really hate seeing rocks. Pretty nice idea. Then you have Bulk Up Timburr, and this was just a win condition on a stick, and it's actually really funny. And I'll get into it a little bit, but if we go to the viability rankings real quick. In A tier, you have Abra, and Abra just one-shots Timburr, and it's a really hard matchup for it. But the thing is that if you just get enough bulk ups, Mock Punch kills it because Abra has defenses like paper, and that's very funny. So what you do is that if your opponent lets you, you just bulk up a whole bunch of times and then kill the Abra on baseline. You can still run Iron Fist on the bulk up set if you want, because it boosts your Drain Punch and Mock Punch. But you have options. It was also just kind of... You also have a whole bunch of coverage moves. You don't use them too often is the issue, because you definitely want that 4th move to be either Bulk Up or Defog, as either a win condition with Bulk Up or really good team support with Defog. But you have the Elemental Punches, you have Thunder Punch, you have Fire Punch, you have Ice Punch, and those are always really nice to have as coverage moves, so that way you can break past some things that would otherwise wall you. Like, Ice Punch can be used for Fungus and Natu, and then you have Thunder Punch for Natu again, as well as Marianne. Like, just having that option there, really nice. Then we have the standout of the generation, surprisingly. We didn't... I say we as if I was there for the entire time. But the point is, this Farfetch'd set was relatively new when the generation got ended, I guess. When we went to Generation 9, this was a relatively new set, pioneered by CM Doge, and you'll see why that's important in a sec. Well, a little bit, but it has Close Combat, still has Knockoff. All of them have Knockoff, so even though it's like, oh, well, I could just go into my bulky Poison type, that'll just wall it. Nah, Knockoff. You ruin its bulk for the rest of the game. Brave Bird. This is such a stellar selling point of Farfetch'd Galar. Although you don't have the same bulk, if we look at Timburr's stats bar real quick, you can see 75 HP, 55 defense, very physically bulky, and not very fast, but that was kind of fun because you had Mock Punch, as well as a really good attack stat. All of them have really good attack stats, but this is very clearly a more bulky mod. Whereas if we go to look at Farfetch'd Galar, it's not... Like, it's still got some good bulk, 52 HP, 55 defense, 62 special defense, but that's not really why you want to run it. It's because its attack stat's 95, which is stronger than even Minfu. Like, 19? That's pretty crazy. and you have a pretty decent speed stat at that. But Brave Bird meant that anything that really wanted to check Farfetch'd Galar couldn't do it too effectively, because you have stuff like Marionine. It's like, oh, well, it can take the close combats and knockoffs perfectly fine. Does not take Brave Bird. You can't check it with Mean Fu or Timburr because of the Brave Bird. It's such good coverage. You also have Quick Attack if you ever want to use that. It's pretty alright. It's not a bad fourth move option, because it's just a little bit of revenge killing that you can do on the side. You could also run a Scarf set and run Final Gambit, because your HP stat is actually pretty good, 22, not bad at all. And then you could still run Close Combat, Brave Bird, Knockoff. It was a pretty good idea. And these are all, like, really strong in the metagame. But what exactly would get in the way of it? The fighting roadblocks. You have Divide by Zero Coughing, just because it has the ability Neutralizing Gas, which nullifies all other abilities, which is really important versus Mean Fu, and especially versus Timburr, because it nullifies either, well, any of Regenerator, Iron Fist, and Guts, meaning that if Timburr is burned, it stays burned, does not get a boost from the burn, as well as if Mean Fu gets chipped down while Coughing's out, it doesn't get Regenerator, which is really impactful. You also just have a bunch of stuff in your move pool because you're a Generation 1 Mon, and they just sort of have that for whatever reason. You have Sludge Bomb, Fire Blast, Dark Pulse, alright, but you also have Clear Smog to prevent things from setting up on you. You have Gyro Ball, you have Haze, you have Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt was really good because, as you can see here, we have Marionine and Frillish. So in order to be a better teammate to your fighting types, in order to be able to break those over, you can run Thunderbolt, but it was sort of an option. You didn't have to, because it made it kind of weak to set up, which was annoying. But you have Fire Blast, Will-O-Wisp. If you want to, you can also run Thief, which was a really cool tech because there's so much knockoff running around in the tier. You get your Eviolite knocked off, just steal another one, it's fine. And then also to keep itself healthy, you have Pain Split. It's not ideal, and we'll definitely see that with stuff like Marionine having Recover, Fungus having Synthesis, Larvesta having Morning Sun, Natu having Roost, Frillish having Recover. All of these have reliable recovery options, and that made Coughing, despite the fact it's actually a defensive Pokemon, it was very offensively oriented, which was really nice. But Pain Split was very exploitable late game, and it was a bit hard to always get away with. With that being said, if we look at the viability rankings, it was an A+ tier just because being able to shut down Mean Fu is stupidly good. Also, Diglett's there. Diglett is A+, not banned. Really big reason why that's important is that Neutralizing Gas means that Arena Trap doesn't exist, so you don't get trapped. Really offensive, but really defensive, Divide by Zero, because it's incalculable how valuable Coughing's Neutralizing Gas was. Next up, we have the immovable object to our unstoppable force in Mean Fu, Marionine. It has some really good tools, Scald, so that way you can hit, especially offensively, possibly burn the target off of Stab. You have Knockoff to once again remove items. You have Sludge Bomb to poison your opponent. It's just another good stab move, so that way you don't blank into stuff like Frillish. It can run Water Absorb if it wants to, but Curse Body is the standard. But also, with that being said, being able to poison something is also really valuable. You also have Recover for reliable recovery, and you also have Regenerator, which is really good on a defensive Mon, because that means that, okay, yeah, I can just come in, do what I want to do of taking hits, and then just switch out like I naturally want to do, and it's all A-okay. The important bit is that this was trapped by Diglett. It's not bad, because if we look, it's at A-, and it's really good at walling a lot of things. Its defensive profile is just so wonderful, because Water Poison typing, fantastic. It's got 62 defense, 52 special defense, 50 HP. It's much more balanced compared to, if we look at Coughing, it's very top-heavy, sort of. It's got a lot of defense and a lot of special defense. And, like, obviously this is a fantastic special defense, but the point is, this is a lot more of a balanced, I can take a whole bunch of hits no matter what and then leave, whereas Coughing was more, I am here to take on the fightings, and also Gurki. I'm going to get into Bonky Kong maybe in another video, but Coughing was much more, I am a physical wall and doing nothing else, whereas Marionine was much more, I am general team support because I can take a whole bunch of hits, threaten with some statuses and Scald and Sludge Bomb, knock off to make the team much weaker, and then also stay healthy. It wasn't bad, and I was really good at walling Mean Fu and Timburr, because Timburr very often didn't run Thunder Punch because it wanted defog or bulk up. So it was a really good choice, but you had to be very careful when using it. Poor Sussex Among Us. It got voted out late in the generation. And that's not even its own fault. It's just because, although it's got a really good move pool, having Spore causing sleep so you get 1 to 3 free turns, Giga Drain so that way it can keep itself healthy, Synthesis also has Regenerator and has Sludge Bomb. The reason why it stopped seeing usage is that Natu exists, and it has Magic Bounce, and that blocks status moves, so your one saving grace, which is Spore, of sleeping your opponent, just doesn't work. There was also Ferroseed a lot of the time in the generation, and that just blanks literally everything that you want to do. So, just real quick, Ferroseed. What it would run is, like this set, it's a Steel Grass type, so that means that Quadruple resists the Giga Drain, immune to Sludge Bomb, and cannot be Spored because of the Grass type. And then it'll also get a lot of progress with Knockoff. It can possibly set up Stealth Rock if it wants to. So it's really hard for Fungus to get a lot of progress. With that being said, if you do not see any of Natu and or Ferroseed, then this was exceedingly valuable because it was really hard to break over, had Spore support, and all of, like, being able to poison and or sleep something is really good. And keeping yourself healthy with Regenerator is still really valuable. It really dropped off though. It went down to minus rank, dear lord. Morlow's also there because it's literally just like a palette swap of Fungus. That's basically what it is. So if we go to that real quick, all it really did was, oh well, my abilities affect Spore, so instead of being just this passive wall that gets U-turned on a lot, I can have a possible chance of getting a lot of progress versus Mean Fu by paralyzing it or sleeping it without even trying, which is nice. You still have manual Spore if you want it. You have Giga Drain if you want to be able to, you know, keep yourself healthy as well as hit water types. And then you have Moonblast, which is really good coverage because the issue with Sludge Bomb, it's not bad, but Moonblast being able to hit Mean Fu and Timburr that much harder is always really valuable. And you still have Synthesis. Also, when it comes to your defensive stats, you're more specially defensive, so you can still take a lot of other hits that you wouldn't normally, even though your HP is a little bit worse than Fungus. The Glass Tank Larvesta, it really had its start in very heavy air quotes. I don't know before Generation 8, but what made it really good is that it's a bug fire type and it can resist a lot of fighting type attacks with its really good defensive profile of good HP, good defense, good special defense. It can take a lot of hits. And also because it has Flame Body, so there's a 30% chance a Pokemon making contact will be burned, and that's really good because, well, Mean Fu relies on its physical attack. All of them do. Well, the only issue is Farfetch'd with Brave Bird, but it's such a good matchup versus Mean Fu not running Stone Edge and Timburr because, well, you can just burn them, and then as they go out, you can just U-turn, get your own momentum, and it's all A-okay. You still have manual Will-O-Wisp if you're worried about, like, oh, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to get the 30%. And you also have Reliable Recovery and Morning Sun. And then if you're wondering, oh, well, isn't this a bit passive? Well, no, I got Flare Blitz, so I can do a lot of damage back. Really nice. Its main issue was that it has quadruple Stealth Rock weakness, and Drillbur exists in the tier, and that brings us actually to Natu, the Angry Bird. Its specialty was Magic Bounce of keeping off stuff like Stealth Rock so that way it could be a good partner for Larvesta, as well as just being a really nice utility mon. You can break over stuff like Ferroseed with Heat Wave, Psychic so that way you can threaten at the fighting, this Roost to keep yourself healthy, and then U-turns so that way you can keep momentum even though you may be in a bad matchup. But with all that being said, the issue was that Drillbur existed, and that could set up rocks in Natu's face. It's not like Natu was ever bad, but the main issue was just like, well, it was a bit passive and it was really easy to set up on. But it's such a good check to Mean Fu because of a few reasons. First, your speed is just enough that you can speed tie it, and you have really good special attack, in addition to having some pretty good bulk. Not bad. So what it essentially allowed you to do was 1v1 Mean Fu and put it into this really uncomfortable position of, well, if you lose the speed tie, you get a lot of damage from Psychic, and you don't really want to stay in. Not to mention, like, Natu can get a lot of advantage. Just be like, oh, well, I'm in a bad matchup versus, you know, I have Mean Fu versus Natu. I don't really want to risk my Mean Fu, so I'm just going to go to this other mon in the back. Oh, well, I can just U-turn out on your switch and don't lose any momentum. It's all okay. There was quite a lot of fighting resists, and Natsu was kind of questionable. Like, the issue was that it was a psychic flying type, and although it had a quad resist for high jump kick and stuff like that, it took a lot of damage from knockoff, and that was a bit annoying. Final mention that I had earlier was Frillish, the Deep Sea Stinger, because Water Ghost means that you have an immediately defining type moves, which is really valuable when Minfu likes running high jump kick, so you can make it lose 50% of its HP. That was more of a call-out than a strategy, because, you know, they could just play it safe and use knockoff, and then you're kind of screwed. But you also have really good support move pool of Scald. You have Hex, so that way when you do get a burn on the opposing team via Scald or Will-O-Wisp, then you get a 130 stab base power move, so that's pretty cool. And then you also have Recover to keep yourself healthy. It's all really nice, and then if you're lucky, you can just 1v1 them anyway because you get a cursed body proc and they can't use knockoff anymore. And that was pretty neat. But what exactly did you want to hit in Generation 8? The simple answer is... there's a few, but I wouldn't consider it, like... the main thing that made fighting so good was that they had really good neutral matchups, in addition to having some really good advantage matchups, which is between the Steels of the tier and Porygon. Porygon's weird. But you had a really good matchup versus Ferroseed, because even though... I'm just remembering the fact that, if I go to the calc real quick... Calc please, we have Ferroseed from that one, and then we have Minfu. It takes a high jump kick, which is the most absurd thing that I've ever seen. And it could do it pretty reliably too, which was very dumb. But it was that bulky, but also being able to do that really ruined its defensive capabilities throughout the course of the game. It's meant to be a special wall, not a physical one, even though it could take physical attacks really well too. But it couldn't recover very reliably. Giga Drain was a good option because if we actually look at the special attack here, although it's 24, that's really pitiful. Well, because of how Little Cup works, it's essentially equivalent to your attack set with a little bit of investment, so it was all A-okay. Then you also have Knockoff, which was valuable. Thunder Wave, so that way it could be just pure setup fodder of, oh, well, I'm just going to Thunder Wave the opponent when they try to set up on me. And it's also a good general team utility because if Minfu comes in hoping to bonk the Ferroseed, it's like, oh, now you're just paralyzed, and then you lose a whole bunch of matchups. And then you also have Stealth Rock for good team support. Next up is Pawniard, and Pawniard had a really interesting... It's interesting because if we go to the calc again, we have Ferroseed versus Minfu, but then we have Pawniard versus Minfu. And it's actually really funny because if Pawniard gets enough hits on Minfu, it can deal with it really effectively. In addition, Pawniard... That's the wrong generation. Pawniard... Berry Juice. That's the one I want. And then Minfu, Book Pivot. So, you have Knockoff, which was always really annoying because Minfu likes keeping it. But also, if it was knocked off, Sucker Punch does a surprising amount of damage. And it very often meant that if your Minfu was low and tried to switch into Pawniard, it could Iron Head into Sucker Punch and kill you, which was very funny. But also, with that being said, it did not like seeing Minfu too often because it would... If you had to play really careful, because if at any point you're just like, oh, well, I predict this Minfu is going to U-turn because he thinks that I'm going to switch out, and then you just high jump kicks into your face, and then your Pawniard's dead, then what are you going to do? You just lost your Pokemon, L. But you still have Knockoff, Iron Head, Sucker Punch, Stealth Rock, and a really good stat distribution, good attack, good defense, and really nice speed. You didn't run full speed in this generation. You will in the next one. And that's just because you didn't really need it all that much. It's mainly meant as a defensive Pokemon anyway. So, it's a defensive Pokemon with benefits, not really an offensive Pokemon that wants to break things. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, but that wasn't its main role. Next up, you have Porygon, and... So I need you to understand something real quick. You see these stats, 65 HP, 70 defense, 75 special defense. For context on how good that is, we have Girafarig, which is currently legal in Generation 9 Scarlet Violet Little Cup. It has 70, 65, 65. You have to understand, Porygon is bulkier than Girafarig. It is frankly absurd. That doesn't mean it was unbalanced. It was very strong, but it was really hard to break over, especially when it just has 85 special attack, because it can. So it's a defensive Pokemon. Well, It's got 2 other sets, agility and choice scarf, but like, this was stupidly good defensively, and it was one of the things that the fighting types love being able to deal with, because you can just fighting move into it, knock off the Eviolite, and make it worse. It was really, really good. But also because you have priority like Mach Punch, you could revenge kill the Choice Scarf set, which was always nice. Stuff like that. Overall, it was just really annoying, and you needed to knock it if you wanted to break it over reasonably. You also have Magnemite, and if we go to the Vibrator rankings just real quick, for context, Porygon is A+, we have Ferroseed in A, and then we have Magnemite in B+. Magnemite isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that it was very underwhelming compared to everything else. Like, Volt Switch and Flash Cannon, very nice neutral coverage, and then you also have Recycle plus Berry Juice, so... But what happened there is that you would take a hit, go down to Sturdy, have 1 HP, then after that, because you have Berry Juice, you recover 20 HP. And because you have 19 HP at level 5, you essentially have 2 free hits that you can take because of Berry Juice plus Sturdy. And you can keep on repeating it because you have Recycle and Endure. So even if your opponent's like, oh, well, I'll just chip you down a little bit, and then I can kill you afterwards, it's like, oh, well, I can just endure the hit, and then I get back up to full with Berry Juice, and now we start the cycle all over again. The main issue was that if you ever got your Berry Juice knocked off, you couldn't do Recycling again, so that was annoying. But also, with that being said, it could be a really good defensive resource. Pretty funny at that. Also, special mention shout out to Papillion, because Munchlax exists, and it was really annoying, and it really hated fighting types, but it still thrived despite the fact that fighting types were everywhere, because it just... Look at this bulk. 135 HP, 85 special defense, 40 defense, and also, oh yeah, I'm just running Curse, so, you know, I can just Curse up a few times, and then even the fighting type moves don't scare me. So it's whatever. Very stupid. But it was surprisingly effective, especially as a special wall. But that's all the stuff that you really wanted to hit. But then the issue was that you could also get out-offensed by a few things, namely Carvanha, Abra, and Tyrant. And the reason why I'm bringing these up is that what Carvanha has is Speed Boost plus Life Orb boosted attacks. So essentially what would happen is that it has Psychic Fangs to hit all of the fighting types, and it outspeeds all of them after a speed boost. And if you're worried, like, what if they're Scarf Pokemon? Well, then I can just use Protect, so it's totally okay. Now, there is priority from Fetch Galar and Timburr, but if they can't switch in is the big point. But Carvanha was such a good cleaner that it was really hard for opposing teams to get a lot of progress, especially if Coughing's there. And if we go to Calc once again, and we look at Carvanha, Psychic Fang, that's without Eviolite, hold on. There we go. But Psychic Fangs can't kill Mienfoo without a little bit of chip. So if you just get a little bit of chip because, oh, well, I use Flip Turn, and that does 9 damage, and then Mienfoo's down 12, and then I go to my Coughing, and then Mienfoo switches out afterwards. Well, then I'm really stuck because now my Mienfoo dies the next time it comes in when it versus Carvanha. So there's that. It's really, like, the issue with Carvanha was all about, like, well, just don't let it get going, and then you'll be fine. You also have Abra, which outsped all of them, and then just hit really hard with Psychic, killing all of them in one hit. So, I mean, it's got no defenses, and 15 defense, 25 HP. It's not taking anything. But also, with that being said, it would hit like a truck, and it's really hard to wear down because of Magic Guard. So, and then if you're thinking, oh, well, I'll get a nice little prediction going, and then I'll be able to deal with Abra that way. And no, it's got substitutes, so getting in it, nerd. Lamau. Also, if Tyrant ever got a single Dragon Dance, it would kill your entire team with Psychic Fangs. If we go back to the Calc, Calc is your friend. And then Tyrant, Psychic Fangs, it almost kills Mienfoo without any boost, and then you get up to +1. He's not even taking it with Eviolite. It's very dumb. It could break, and it's really hard to be able to deal with it, because even if you're like, oh, well, you know, I can just run Timburr instead, and what Timburr can do is that I can Revenge Kill with Mach Punch, and it doesn't do much more than half. Okay, so yeah, if it just was at, like, full HP and you let it get set up, Mach Punch ain't doing anything. So, and that's also dependent upon having Iron Fist. If you're Guts, good luck, you're not breaking it. With all that being said, fighting types are really good because of their neutral coverage, as well as really good stat pools, as well as move pools. But, do they have enough to beat the wildcard wrestlers of Generation 9? Well, the Crustacean Crusher here, it has a lot going for it because it's got a really nice speed tier, gets up to 17 speed at level 5, and it has good defenses, and a really high attack stat, which is all really nice. Its main thing that it does is that it likes bulking up, so that way it becomes harder to revenge kill from physical attackers. It has Iron Fist to boost all of its moves, but the bulk up also boosts your attack and defense, so it can become a really potent late-game sweeper. Really interesting that way. You've also got a bunch of coverage options like Crab Hammer and Earthquake for some reason. And if you're thinking, well, I don't really want to run either of those, well, cool, you can run Close Combat if you want. You can run Iron Head if you're worried about Ice... Well, not Ice type, I'm sorry. I mean, if you're worried about Ice types, you could run Iron Head, but it's also for Fairy types. You have Rock Slide if you're worried about Larvesta and really want it gone. But you could also run Zen Headbutt if you're worried about Ghastly. It's got a really deep move pool, which is pretty funny. And I think it's the biggest difference between Generation 9 fighters and Generation 8 fighters is that it might be because the meta was more set in stone, but Minfu has a very rigid moveset. It has to play very honest. You're not going to have like, aha, well, I mean, like you have a slot for it with like this one, but also with that being said, like you're going to see high jump, kick, U-turn, knockoff. When it comes to something like Crabrawler, you're likely going to be seeing Drain Punch, most likely Ice Punch, so that way it can beat over Toadstool. But then, like, this third slot, it can go ahead and be anything. Crab Hammer, Earthquake, Zen Headbutt, go for anything. And you can run 4 attacks if you want to as well. You don't even have to run bulk up. It can be really unpredictable. Next up, we have Mankey, literally too angry to die. We have Close Combat. Once again, you don't care about the defense decreases if you're just going to be faster than your opponent. U-turn for momentum, and then you have your flavors of choice. Well, flavors of coverage moves. That's what I'm looking for. You have Earthquake if you want to. You can run Fire Punch. You have Gunk Shot for fairies if you're worried about that. You have Night Slash for ghost types. Outrage if you want to hit dragons for whatever reason. Also, because of your Generation 1 mod, you have Overheat. I don't know when you want to use it, but you have it. Rock Slide, you also have Stone Edge. So, I mean, like Rock Slide and Stone Edge, so that way you can hit Larvesta. Seed Bomb if you're worried about Wooper. Shadow Claw if you really want to hit ghost types and nothing else. Night Slash is pretty sure just objectively better because it doesn't blanket normal types, but you can also run Thunder Punch if you want, and U-turn. It's got a lot going on in this kit. And Ice Punch so that way you can hit Toadstool. Pretty nice. Next up, we have Krogunk. I very greatly underestimate this because I've gotten sweet by it because it's just like, oh, well, I used to use Nasty Plot and I have Vacuum Wave, and now you can't deal with me, Lamau. And in addition to Terra, so it can just Terra Dark, and then it no longer has this quadruple psychic weakness, so good luck dealing with it. It's surprisingly good. It also has Dry Skin, which gives it a really nice ability to deal with rain teams, as well as just a borderline like blanket check to Marionette, which is really funny, because Marionette has to either hit it with a resisted poison type attack, or it has to hit it with a water type attack, which it can't because of Dry Skin, so pretty nice. But what exactly do you want to be hitting with these wildcard wrestlers? Well, you have Marionette, which is really surprising, because well, it was so good at dealing with Minfu, so good at dealing with Timburr, so why is it here now? The simple answer to that is it lost Scald and it lost Knockoff, meaning that its kit's much worse, so you have to run Surf if you want Water Stab. And also the current fightings that we have, such as Crabrawler and Mankey, they can just slot a coverage move for Marionette and it's no big deal. So it does mean that you have to predict around what exactly is my opponent going to do, but it can be really hard to deal with. Next up, Glimmet, the new addition to Generation 9. It's got Toxic Debris to set Toxic Spikes, but also although it's a poison type, it's also rock, so it's not going to be resisting any of your fighting attacks anyway. And coverage moves, so it has a bit of a hard time with Krogunk as well, because it resists both of the stabs, and Krogunk has surprisingly good matchups. I underestimate it a lot. But Glimmet is definitely a cut above the rest when it comes to being able to set hazards and being a good defensive one. It's also a pretty good partner to any of the fighters, because being able to Toxic Spikes the Psychic-type Pokemon and stuff like that is always pretty nice. Next up, Pawniard, as before, but it runs a different moveset this time. Iron Head, Brick Break, Sucker Punch, Stealth Rot. It lost Knockoff in the translation to Generation 9, which really sucks for it, but also with that being said, it can just Terra type into something not weak to fighting types, and that can be really annoying to deal with. However, you can still just outspeed and KO this in one hit if there's no Terra, which is funny and also fun. Next up, we have Max Muscle Zorua because of the Illusion ability, and I mean, it can also run Terra Blast in the 4th slot, but the main thing that you're running is Knockoff, Sucker Punch, and U-Turn. You gotta be careful of some Sword Stance or Nasty Plot variants, but also with that being said, like, its main attacking type is Dark, and being able to use Crabrawler to just take some hits from Zorua, or use Krogunk to Vacuum Wave Zorua to death is really nice. It's a really nice addition. And then we have the Little Lamb of Death, Deerling, and the reason why I hate it so much is because it has Thunder Wave to paralyze the target. Paralyze the target, which means that you have a 25% chance of not moving and your speed is halved, and then you have Headbutt and Zen Headbutt, which each have a chance to flinch the target, plus Serene Grace, which doubles secondary effect chances, meaning that good luck trying to get through things, bucko! But you can hit it really hard, really fast with something like Mankey, or it doesn't really switch in too well versus Crabrawler, and although it's got Zen Headbutt to hit the fightings, you can still hit it exceedingly hard because of its normal grass typing. It's pretty nice. The stuff that gets in the way, though, it's mainly just ghost types. You don't have access to Knockoff. Also, Larvesta's back, and also you have more spinners, so it's better, but I have a different video on that. But with that being said, you also have just Sting like a Beedrill and Float like a Butterfree here. They can really effectively wall your fighting type moves, and it's really hard to get a lot of progress versus them. Like, obviously, you have coverage moves for Drifloon and Ghastly that you can use with Crabrawler, but it's a guessing game, and if you guess wrong, they come in for free and start beating you with Will-O-Wisp, and or like, they can run Acrobatics here. It can be really hard to deal with them. Oh, you also have Goodest Boy here, who just takes all of your attacks really well because it has Fluffiest ability, which you take half damage from contact moves. So, it's a pretty effective hard wall, especially when you don't have knockoff or dark type moves. Well, effective dark type moves, I should say that, because if you wanted to run Crabrawler, I'm like, oh, well, what dark type moves does it have? It's got these. It's not working. Don't try it. But it's really hard to break over the ghost types when there's not all that much dark coverage. Also, if you're wondering, oh, well, why isn't Ghastly and Drifloon in the other section of the things that'll block, you know, Generation 8 if I included Frillish? That's because they got banned, and that's pretty funny. A lot of flying types and a lot of ghost types got banned from Generation 8 for being too good. So now the fighting types just rule the metagame, because you can't run stuff like Rufflet because that's banned, you can't run stuff like Vullaby because that's banned, you can't run Ghastly, you can't run Drifloon. So, it's a lot easier for fighting types to thrive when there's not just a bunch of ghosts going around. So the meta's not too hospitable to it. Also, two important mentions are that Tear King Giraffering just shreds all of these, because it's got Twin Beam. Now, obviously, Krogunk can just Terra Dark, but without Terra, it just dies. And then Gothita can trap them really effectively by using Psychic. Well, you can't use it versus Mankey, because Mankey's typically Choice Scarf and doesn't really care. But, with that being said, if it's in sticky webs or it gets paralyzed at any point, Gothita can trap it. And then the newcomer Nimble, John Dark Souls, can just kill you with Tinted Lens First Impression. Oh, I'm a fighting type, I resist Bug. No. No. No, you don't. Nimble says no. You cannot. This is a fate inescapable. Deal with it. Alright, well, with that being said, Nimble can just revenge kill you. You're still a good check to it, and you can switch in pretty reliably, because like, Crabrawler is pretty physically bulky, and I'm pretty sure Krogunk is a quadruple resistant. That's pretty nice. But it can be really hard to deal with if you're very low. Now, when it comes to tournament games, there's a lot going on when it comes to fighting types. So, if we go to Little Cup Premier League 11, this was the final Generation 8 Team Tour. Yeah, this was final Generation 8 Team Tour, huh? Now that I think about it. But we have tiebreaker because it went from, if we go back to this real quick, finals, Skitty Committee versus Rem Raiders. They tied 4-4, so they have to go to tiebreaker. This is like last, like very, very end of everything sort of thing. Then they have to go to tiebreaker. And we have Lily AC, Zav, ISS on Skitty Committee, Remorators, Ace, Prodigies, and Corkscrew. All really good players. And for context, like, oh, well, how close was this? So, Wi-Fi, don't you dare. Why does my Wi-Fi do this to me? Alright, hold on. No. Why? Alright. Come on. Well, congratulations. All right. Well, this is what I was trying to get at, is that we get to literally final game 3, where can I go back on this one? Yes, I can. All right. So Zav and SS game 1 and Black and White game 1 were fought. Corkscrew wins for Remorators. Zav wins for Sword and Shield, and it's literally tied 1-1. We get from tiebreaker 4-4, literally down to the exact final game. Nothing more after this. And Lily AC brings this really new-ish team of Farfetch'd and Timburr. And it's this really cool fight spam team. And Ace has Larvesta as his fight resist, which doesn't work versus Farfetch'd. And it just absolutely trounces Ace. And this is what I meant by Farfetch'd being a very late sort of addition, quote-unquote, of people didn't realize that Farfetch'd was this good of a breaker, especially because, oh, well, just knocking it off, whatever. I don't have to worry about the ghost types. It's all A-okay, and then you just kill the Brave right afterwards, so that way you prevent switch-ins. It's dumb. The point being, Farfetch'd can break a lot of stuff, and it's not walled by the usual things that would otherwise wall stuff like Minfu and Timburr, which is really valuable. And it's just to show that's how powerful those are as a concept of just, oh, well, that's how good the fighting types were. There's also, I don't think my wife was going to cooperate, so I would show these replays, but I do have this one loaded of Wei versus Friezai. And the reason why is that Minfu was exceedingly popular, because very often what you could just do is, I just run Minfu versus Minfu, it's all okay. And it's, what are you going to do? Now, obviously, it's just like, oh, well, this is a very brain-dead play. Nobody's going to be that smart. Well, what the point is that, like, actually, this was very interesting as a concept, because, like, on Friezai's side, you have Staryu, you have Grookey, you have Tyron. So, you actually want to not risk any of those, because you have to worry about, like, breaking over Marionette. You really want to break that over. So, to make sure that your defensive core is still A-okay, while breaking over Whales, you lead Minfu, so that way you can soften up the enemy team and be able to break later on, hopefully getting a knock on Marionette, so that way you can open up Grookey, open up Staryu, that kind of stuff. Where Whale is doing that, so that way, like, Whale is leading Minfu here, so that way, like, nothing on this team is really faster than it's a good lead, because it's got a good matchup versus Staryu, good versus Pawn, Tyron. Mid versus Natu, good versus Grookey, and good versus other Minfu. It's sort of like his best option that literally covers everything, and it's hard to have a bad lead by leading Minfu here. Pretty funny. Next up, we have, this is Little Cup Winter League. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, if we go to this one, I'm going to go over first, because this is my teammate Elfu. We are on the Blue Eyes White Bagons. Best team name, fight me. But also, that being said, just to show how good Mankey is, even in like a neutral matchups, like, oh well, this is rain, and I mean, like, Alpha's got a really good matchup here, but to even further drive into like how good is Mankey here? Well, you know, this just kill the rain setter before it could even set rain. You know, get an absolutely absurd advantage turn 1, despite the fact that you were probably gonna win anyway. Like, that's how stupidly good Mankey is. And for, well, what about Crabrawler? Do you want to see a Crabrawler 1v1 or Larvesta? Because I know I have. So let me just skip ahead a little bit. So my Crabrawler comes in here, takes the Sandile's hits, that's fine. Larvesta comes in, and then my Crabrawler bulks up. It's all A-okay. Just keep on bulking up. I'm going to go hyper fast here, so that way you can just get the idea of, well, even though this Crabrawler's burned, Larvesta's not killing it, which is a bit strange, and that's because you have Drain Punch on Crabrawler, it just doesn't die if you don't have Flare Blitz. It can really easily 1v1 a Larvesta, which is very funny, because Drain Punch has more power points, and you can just keep on bulking up, and then it just doesn't. It just keeps on going, and like this, yeah, and then he forfeits afterwards. But the entire point is, Crabrawler could still win even in unfavorable matchups just because it can get really bulky with bulk up. Very funny. I think overall, it can be said that the practice pugilists of Generation 8 definitely won this because of their general excellence overall. Like, the wildcard wrestlers here, they do have a good chance because, like, Mankey is really good as a Pokemon. Like, Krogunk, I think, is underwhelming, but it's got a lot of good stats. But Mankey is really good as a Scarfer. Crabrawler is really good as a general Utility-mon, as well as having a win con and bulk up. But the issue is that, like, Mienfoo was just that good in that meta that it's really hard to dispute when it's literally just Tier King. Generation 8 has it by a mile, but I wouldn't say that Generation 9 fightings are bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just interesting to see how much a generational shift and like a dex hit of, oh well, I only have a limited dex, really changes how the meta plays. Thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you could leave a like, a comment, and share this video, as well as subscribe, I'd very much appreciate it. And as always, have a good day.